everybody. This is Ask Me Anything About Politics. So, if you got any questions about politics, just let me know in the chat, and I will do my best to give you a great, objective, sincere answer. I know the politics is particularly weird these days, so it can be really difficult to figure out what's going on, especially if you are somebody who has not followed politics in the past. What's up, Dan? Good to see you again. So yeah, if you got any questions about politics, just put them here in the chats, and I will do my best to give you an objective and sincere answer. There's a lot of misinformation out there, a lot of propaganda, and social media is just filled with inaccurate information. And so, where can you go to ask all of your questions? Where can you go to try to figure out what's actually going on in the world? Where can you go to get an honest assessment of what the government is doing? What's real, what's not real, or maybe you're just somebody who, like you don't feel comfortable asking these questions in person because you're worried about, oh, if I ask this, my friends are going to think I'm some sort of a MAGA person, or oh, if I ask this, my friends are going to think I'm some sort of a cuck libtard person. Well, there's no judgments here. You can ask any kind of question that you like, and there's nobody's going to roast you or make fun of you for not knowing things or call you names or anything. This is not that kind of show. This is not the show for debates or yelling at each other or, you know, calling each other uninformed or stupid or trying to own each other or trying to win any kind of debates. This is just good faith answers to all of your good faith questions about politics. I know that politics can be really difficult to get into when you're first trying to learn about it, and I don't believe in making fun of people for trying to learn new things. What's up, Digital Foods? Good to see you again as well. So, yeah, any questions about politics, just throw them in the chat and we will do our best to give you a sincere and objective answer. There is no such thing as a dumb question. I don't care if you're Republican, I don't care if you're Democrat. All good faith questions will be given good faith answers. Maybe you're somebody on the right and you've always wanted to know, hey, why are people on the left like the way that they are? If you're asking in good faith, then you will get a good faith answer. Let's see here. A self-described leftist libtard person. Oh, well. Yeah, I feel you, man. I know exactly what that's like. Okay, so any questions about politics, you just throw them in the chat, and I'll do my best to give you a great, objective, and sincere answer. There's no fights here, there's no roasting, there's no debating, nobody's gonna get owned, nobody's gonna get destroyed, nobody's gonna get slammed. It is just good faith answers to all of your good faith questions. Let's get into it. Maybe you guys don't agree with me on things policy wise. Maybe you think that the solution to our problems is something different than either the left or the right has. Let's get into it. I believe that we make our country better by engaging more people in politics, by parsing out what is accurate information and what is not accurate information, and trying to figure out what it is that we can all agree on. Celia says, what do you think is going on with the fella with the island files? What I think is going on is, did you see that news that piece of news the other day that came out where some dude who worked for the for Pam Bondi or someone else in the Trump administration told his date that they were going through those files and redacting all Republican names and highlighting or putting in Democratic names? That's what I think is going on. There's been some reporting to suggest that the FBI has redirected like 1,000 different agents just to taking out names from those documents, and so that is what I think the delay tactic is. I think they're just working on monkeying up the data so that it does not hurt them. Zach says, did Holman keep the 50K? Was 50K reported as income? America needs answers. I completely agree with that. Zach, I think it's fucking bullshit, and we should all be pissed off about the fact that the FBI just threw out a case against a dude who they had dead to rights accepting a $50,000 bribe just because he's Trump's border czar. That is not how the law is supposed to work. If you break the law, you're supposed to suffer consequences for breaking the law. It's not just who you know. It's not if you have a lot of money you can escape it. It's not if you're the president you can escape it. It's not if you are the president's buddy you can escape it. We should all be pissed off about this. Regardless of which party does it, you should be pissed if people are cashing in political favors to escape legal justice. Kimberlina says, do you think Lutnick's gonna get booted? I don't. I don't. This version of the Trump administration, the only thing that you will get fired for is disloyalty. Whereas before, there was some adherence to, are they actually doing a good job? Is there a scandal? The people in his orbit have learned the lesson that if you yell and scream, if you go in front of the Senate committees and you call all the Democrats names and you say that it's a witch hunt and you defend Donald Trump until your last lying breath, then you're fine. Then you're 100% fine. Breck says, why wouldn't they have scrubbed the files beforehand? They had plenty of time to do. I mean, they didn't necessarily. So the files were sitting in the hands of a guy named Christopher Wray, who was in charge of the FBI until Trump's second term. And say what you want about Christopher Wray, he was a Republican. He was appointed by Donald Trump himself. He appears to be sort of a straight shooter. And so if he was asked by somebody within the Trump orbit to remove any damaging information about Trump, I'm guessing he would say no. He might assist with some, like, what do you call it? With some tactics to delay putting it out there, or say that it is, I don't know, bad for the victims to keep this information, to put this information out there. But, once we get Kash Patel in there, then, doors open, boys. Like the inmates are in charge of the asylum, and, which is what all bets are off. They can do whatever they want with that data. Phil says, who is this absolutely gorgeous piece of Tuesday? Whoa, thank you, I guess. It's weird to be called a piece of Tuesday, I guess. But I understand it is Tuesday, so yeah. My name is Jared. I'm a comedian. I know a lot about politics, and I'm here doing a bunch of work to try to get people more educated and informed and activated about politics. Matt says, bribes are okay if you are an evangelical. They will forgive themselves. Yeah, sure. Let's see here. All right, excellent questions to start out the live stream with today, everybody. I'm here to answer all your questions, regardless. There's no such thing as a dumb question. It can be as simple or as complicated as you like. If you're somebody on the right and you don't agree with me, but you want to engage in good faith, or you have a question about why are people on the left like this, you can ask this question here, and nobody's going to make fun of you or ridicule you or try to own you or try to debate you. This is not a show for fighting. This is not a show for, owning people or destroying people. This is just good faith answers to all good faith questions. Phil says, I know a little bit too. I'm not a red or a blue. How come you're not a blue, Phil? Luke O'Donoghue says, do you think party politics truly repeat the interests of the people? I think you probably meant represent the interests of the people. I think that party politics has its issues, and I think the two-party system has its issues, but I think it's a little hyperbolic to put all of the onus of our failing government on the two-party system or even party politics. There is some use to party politics. Like there is, I support the platform of the Democratic Party, and so even if I don't like the Democrat that is running in my district, I recognize the value of electing them, because that is one more vote for Democrats in the House or one more vote for Democrats in the Senate. But if you are the kind of person that thinks we need to get rid of political parties or we need to open up our political process to other political parties, then you should vote for Democrats, because the Democratic Party is the only party that is actually trying to open up the political process to other parties. The Republican Party is hostile to the idea of ranked choice voting. They love alternative parties so long as it is splitting the vote, the Democratic vote share, and ushering them into electoral wins that they don't deserve. James says, I'm a libertarian. I believe if you're not infringing on the rights of others, then I don't care. James, I can understand and appreciate that philosophy, but I guess my question to you then would be, how do you feel about towns that have tried to be libertarian or countries that have tried to be libertarian and have gone bankrupt? There was a town in, I think, like the Northeast that tried being libertarian and they got overtaken by bears. Like, does that really track with your libertarian philosophy? Thank you, Luke. I appreciate you. Soko says, why do you think Kamala Harris lost? 4 words, 3 concepts: misinformation, propaganda, and incumbency bias. If you'd like me to clarify any of those points, I will. Hi, David. I'm ignoring you because I know what you're trying to do with that question. I've answered it before, so, miss me with that. It's the Rocketeer says it's the beginning of the month, so use your free Prime subs to give Jared some Bezos bucks. Thank you, It's the Rocketeer. I appreciate you saying that. 48056 says, why do you think only two parties ever get elected president and no one else? So the Democratic and Republican Party have been, the transcendent political parties for a really long time. They have name ID, they have access to fundraising operations and infrastructure. They are intimately connected to how both electoral and governing politics works. They have all of the infrastructure, they have all of the money, they have all of the expertise, they have all of the name ID. Yeah, it makes perfect sense to me. I don't think there's anything, I don't think there's any shenanigans going on keeping them ascendant. Okay, Luke O'Donohue says, are you familiar with None Dare Call It Conspiracy, the book? I have never heard of this book. Luke O'Donoghue says Kamala was a poor candidate, in my opinion. I don't think so. I think that she was hindered by only having 107 days to run her campaign. But I thought she was a totally fine candidate. Not my favorite politician, not my least favorite politician, but she would have been 1,000 times better than what we currently have. El Guero says, can I have your dog? No. Scott Clymer says, bear's better than libertarian. That's pretty funny. Holly Ann Blue says, incumbency bias. Do you want me to clarify, or are you agreeing with me? Shork says, is there a limit to how long the government shutdown can go on for? I do not believe there is a limit, Shork. Let's see here. JC says, how much influence does Israel have over U.S. politics? It has a lot. They're a valuable ally in that region. It's a bunch of countries that really don't care for America for reasons that make a lot of sense. And so it is good access for our military to have a foothold in that area. I also believe that AIPAC, which is an extremely well-funded lobbying organization, has effectively cost a lot of politicians their primaries and general elections because they have not kissed the ring. And so, yeah, they have a lot of influence. But also, anybody that has a lot of money has too much influence in American politics. Luke O'Donoghue says, all right, I did that one. Scrolling down to the bottom, Uncle Hippie Dan, should the world intervene to protect their flotilla citizens from kidnapping by Israel? I mean, we should do everything that we can to not escalate things. But I do think that we should be putting pressure on Israel to treat, our respective citizens that are, being harmed by the actions of Israel, either through their indiscriminate killings in Palestine or through, mishandling the people on the flotilla. A bunch of American citizens have been detained, tortured, killed by the Israeli government, and I think that is unconscionable. Okay, Kimberlina says, thoughts on Purple Revolution. I heard it for the first time yesterday, Kimberlina, so I don't know too much about it. I will say that, I guess it's supposed to be like a new political party of people from the right and people from the left. I'm skeptical that it will end up being a thing. I think if the message of the Purple Revolution is it's us versus the billionaire class, then I think that is valuable. Obviously, the Republican Party is the party that is most intimately connected with the billionaire class, so I'm sure that they're going to do everything they can to wrest their voter base away from the Purple Revolution people. But, again, I don't know too much about it. I'm just kind of spitballing here. East meets Westy Bestie, good to see you again, says, women have chosen the bear every time. Trixie and Noodle says, what do you think will be Musk's role in the next election? I'm sure he's just going to bankroll a bunch of right-wing people. I don't think he's actually going to stand up to Trump or the Republican Party at all. Okay, excellent questions so far, everybody. My name is Jared. I'm here to answer all your questions about politics, regardless of if you are a left-wing person or a right-wing person. I do not believe in debates. I think debates are stupid and unproductive, and so I am not going to debate any of you here. I am just going to answer your questions in good faith. I am going to try to be as objective and sincere as I possibly can, but no one's going to get roasted, no one's going to get ridiculed, no one's going to get debated or owned or destroyed. It is just going to be good faith, sober answers to all of your good faith questions. Emily in the city says, thoughts on Melanie's Hooyay Navy. I'm still laughing. I don't know what that is. Melanie's Hooyay Navy. Do you mean Melania? Did she say something really silly in front of the Navy or something? Yeah, I haven't heard anything about that. Melania, yeah. Oh, that's funny. I mean, she's got a really thick accent and she doesn't really understand the things that she's doing or saying. So, she doesn't want to be there. She just wants to, you know, she just wants to fulfill her contract as a mail order bride, you know. Kitsy Noodle says, "Why are Democrats so incompetent and capable of standing for something?" I don't think they are. Kitsy Noodle. Would you like to talk about that some more? Because I'm happy to engage on that. Um, I think that the narrative around Democrats being incompetent and incapable of standing for something is purposeful and inorganic. And but I'm happy to get into it, Kitschy. Let's see here. Uncle Hippie says debates could be productive if done by intelligent people with verifiable facts. I completely agree with that, Uncle Hippie, but that is not the way that debates have worked for a very long time. Karen says, no, they are not. But you spelled they wrong, Karen. Are you saying that they are not incompetent and incapable of standing for something? You think that they are incompetent and incapable of standing for something? We all let's all get into it today, guys. It's Tuesday. Let's fucking make some shit happen. Karen just says yes. Again, please clarify. You know, I'm happy to get into this with you guys. One of my principles, one of my bedrock principles is that the Democratic Party is better than people give it credit for. That Democrats never get any credit and Republicans never get any blame, and that these narratives they make total sense if you take a look at the big picture. If you kind of have a bird's eye view of all of politics, it makes perfect sense why people would have this idea of the Democratic Party, but it is inaccurate. Righty, let's see here. Cooper says, "Did you see the decision from LeBron?" No, I did not. Oreo says, "Bondi has been very disrespectful. How can the chairperson disrespect the senator?" Message sent to all? Question mark. People within the Trump administration have learned the lesson that they are basically immune from all consequences so long as they are disrespectful and insult Democrats to their face. They can lie in front of them. They can lie to them directly. They can be guilty of perjury, and they will suffer no consequences because Trump is currently the president. So they can stall and delay any kind of subpoena or warrant. And if they actually do suffer any legal consequences, Trump will just pardon them. So, it's bananas. Fletch Lives Again says Democrats need to promote themselves more/better. Yes. I would never argue that the messaging strategy coming out of the Democratic Party is perfect. I might even say that it's not good. But I also think that we ascribe too much of their political failings to a bad messaging strategy, when a lot of the reason why the Democratic messaging strategy doesn't work is because the information environment on every level is weaponized against them by the Republican Party and the billionaire class. Okay, let's see here. Shrimp says, "I don't believe in the whole voting thing. I believe it's a mirage to give people a sense of control." Well, do you vote, Shrimp? Even if you don't believe in voting, I hope that you at least do it just in case it is the thing that makes the difference. But I will happily get into the value of voting if that is something that you would like to discuss. Jane Carter says, "Who cares about money, though? Why do you have to mention that? Who cares? The Democrats aren't for what America is. They've changed it." That's not accurate, Jane Carter. And the reason why money is important is because people with a lot of money are influencing our politics. They are influencing our legislation in order to rig the system to make sure that people like you and me are constantly struggling while they're sitting on their giant fucking yachts and their private jets and in their mega mansions eating lobster and caviar 3 meals a day. Kitschy Noodle says, "Dems put a senile man in office with a VP who never acknowledged inflation or affordability." I don't think that's accurate, Kitschy Noodle. The voters put Joe Biden in office, and he chose a VP who he thought was, a good reflection of the country and who he vibed with. And, it seems like they got along pretty well. I think Kamala Harris has her faults as a politician, but I'm pretty sure she did not acknowledge affordability or inflation. I'm pretty sure that she talked about that when she was campaigning in 107 days. Jane Carter says, yes, it is. You might need to do some research, even though you think you're politically on top. I mean, I am on top of things, Jane, but, you know, the Democrats are for what America is, the promise of America, of a multi, of a melting pot of all different kinds of people, of a place where everybody is free to be who they want to be, so long as they are not infringing on the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness of their fellow citizens. Kitchen Noodle says, what were their proposals for fixing inflation and affordability then? So the Biden administration did effectively solve inflation. With the Inflation Reduction Act, they brought inflation from 9% down to 2.4%, which is where economists think it should generally be. Now, affordability is a different question. It's a much harder problem to solve because the government doesn't set prices. They can try to do things to affect prices, but actually wresting control of pricing away from private corporations is largely credited with causing like the economic collapse that happened during the Nixon administration. And so what can we do to solve affordability? What can we do to solve greedflation? The Biden administration was working on it by doing things like breaking up monopolies, by addressing housing shortage issues, by strengthening the union so that workers can wrest more of the treasure that they are creating, some of the value they're creating for the billionaire owners. But it was a really big problem that took more than 4 years to solve. And so I think that we would have seen a decrease in the affordability crisis if Democrats had won 2024. We are seeing the opposite thing happen now, where inflation is going back up, prices are going up, monopolization is continuing unabated so long as the people that are trying to get their mergers approved adequately kiss Donald Trump's ass. It's the Rocketeer says, crazy how the Dems decided to steal 2020 but not 2024, huh? Yeah, completely bananas. Dan Blackroyd says, the only people who say who cares about money are deflecting because their dad owns SeaWorld. That is accurate. Let's see here. Kitschy Noodle, already did that one. Scott Clywer says, a weekend at Bernie's Biden is far better than an active Trump. That is accurate. I would much rather be being governed by the dusty old bones of Joe Biden than an alive and well fascist. Ace says, I don't know if we could call Trump well. Ace says, how do we get rid of pardons for good so people can't use it for favors? So the Republican Party is never going to get rid of the presidential pardon. They will never allow the executive to lose any power because right now they have an advantage in electoral politics, particularly with the Electoral College. And so they are trying to push as much unitary power into the executive as they possibly can. So they're never going to get rid of that. The way that you get rid of the presidential pardon is by electing Democrats, because the Democratic Party is open to getting rid of the presidential pardon. And if there is a Democrat in office who's actively blocking getting rid of the presidential pardon, then you replace them with a different Democrat. But replacing them with a Republican is just going to be another no vote for getting rid of the presidential pardon. Let's see here. M says, thoughts on Bibi and Israel. Netanyahu is a far-right extremist who is guilty of doing genocide and war crimes against the people of Palestine. The entire world should be rallied against the Netanyahu government. He is artificially extending this conflict with Palestine and Hamas because it is keeping him out of jail and also keeping him in political power. Siflan, good afternoon to you as well. I keep on offering to discuss more of your politics in depth. Let's get into it. Kimberlina says, think Trump was playing dumb or dementia when discussing Ghislaine Pardon. I think he was playing dumb. Like, he was doing a lot of things like, oh, I haven't heard that name in such a long time. Cool. Yeah, sure thing, bro. Yeah, 100%. I don't think that it's dementia. I think that he knows that he is bribing Ghislaine Maxwell with a pardon and with a cushier prison that she is currently residing in. And so his hamming it up for God, I haven't heard that name in such a long time. Yeah, it was blatant as hell, in my opinion. Emily in the City says, do you think the unredacted list will ever be released? Potentially. I mean, I don't know how thoroughly Kash Patel is destroying originals and replacing them with redacted copies. I wouldn't put it past him at all. But I would hope and pray that that information is still out there to be exposed to the public. Okay, Uncle Hippie says, what is the correct pronunciation of Ghislaine? I think it's Ghislaine. I was calling her Ghislaine for a really long time. But it seems that everybody on TV calls her Ghislaine. Will Cole says, Jesus is Lord and he loves you. Repent before it's too late. I appreciate you saying that, Jesus loves me. I think that he does too. I think he loves you as well. Dan Blackwood says, it's Sersha. That's really funny. Let's see here. Seaflon says, I wish I wasn't at work when you are live. All right, well, shoot me a DM, you know? Let's get into it, man. Okay, Original Production Act. It's Rocketeer says, well, yeah, you can't say jizz on TV. Yeah, they probably bleep you if you said jizz lane on TV. Italiano74 says, is it true blue states fund red states? Yes, that is 100% accurate. Red states require more federal funding to survive. Blue states do not. And so blue states often contribute more in federal taxes than they take out in government services. Okay, Fun with Lex says the moon is hollow. I hope and pray it is, Fun with Lex. Good to see you again, man. What time is it over in Thailand or wherever you are living these days? And how is your Famous Dead People clone show going? Oreo20 says, have the Dems not kept the Epstein files in focus? I mean, they are doing what they can to keep them in focus. Mike Johnson is delaying sitting a duly elected representative from Arizona just that he can delay releasing the information longer, you know. But yeah, they're keeping it in the news. Grope says because the Dems didn't campaign on it. They didn't. But they tried to get it released 3 times. One time in 2019 and 2020, and in 2023 they tried to get that shit released. And Republicans filibustered it every single time. East meets Westy Bessie says it's French and proper pronunciation is Ghislaine, no S, long E. Ghislaine. 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 All right. Ghislaine. Ghislaine. I still like Ghislaine. Emily in the city says, was Johnson really on Grindr? LOL. I mean, that dude who said that he had that information who's going to release it never did, so that seems like it was complete utter bullshit. But it is true that anywhere that the RNC goes and has like a convention, sex workers reports they have to like fly in people because demand is so high, and also Grindr crashes like every single time. Grope says, sarcastic answer, sorry, that question is tired about Dems releasing the file as if they didn't try. Because the Dems didn't campaign on it. I'm pretty sure I'm getting your vibe there, Gropes, so yeah, you're good. Jeanette Jensen says, actually saw it when it first came out at the beginning of this regime. What did you see? Say it together, not emphasize the Gee part. Ghislaine, 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 Ghislaine. Oh, let's the Mike Johnson grinder. Oh, you saw it? Where did you see it? Because I didn't see it. I saw that dude who said he was starting to release it, but then he never actually did. And he had a super weird, like, you know, my lawyers are telling me I have to say X, Y, and Z kind of response video. So, yeah, I don't know. But, yeah, I'm not going to say that he's definitely on there or not, but the 2 things that we know as a fact is that they always have to fly in more sex workers wherever the RNC is, and Grindr always crashes when wherever the RNC is. Italiano74 says, do you think Newsom will run for presidency if we have one? We will 100% have a presidential election in 2028. The only reason why we would not is if people like you and me do not do the work of making it happen. The Trump administration is going to try to stop there from being an election in 2028, but they don't get to decide that. We get to decide that. And so just do the work, and we will have an election. And will Newsom run? 100% without question. He is running for president. He's been running for president for a really long time. You know, it's part of his messaging strategy right now. Is the reason why he's doing all this is mostly because he wants to run for president. Kimberlina says, what's going on with Venezuela? Venezuela has been a scapegoat for the Republican right for a really long time because they call themselves socialist, even though they're not socialist. They are an authoritarian regime, but because they call themselves socialist, they're a really good, you know, example of how left-wing politics doesn't work. But they're not left-wing politics, obviously. So because of that, the Trump administration has been escalating tensions with Venezuela in order to potentially start an armed conflict. It is unclear what the exact motivations are right now, but what is clear is that the Trump administration seems to be hawkish about starting something with Venezuela. And it is, I don't know, 100% know why. Potentially he just wants to start a war so that he can, justify doing more military shit that he thinks makes him look good in the news, or he will use that as an excuse to cancel elections going forward or something like that. But yeah, I don't know, man. It's weird shit. Steel Trap says, have you ever considered acquiring a job? I do have a job. I fuck your mom. TikTok is the liberal says, does the Democrats pay you more than Harry Sign a month to tell the same lies? I don't get paid by the Democratic Party at all. I just get paid by your mom to have sex with her. Steel Trap says, my mom doesn't like liberals, but she sure does love this liberal's dick. Linda Barzini says, snowflake meltdowns are hilarious. I agree. These snowflakes who have a problem with me having sex with all their moms are really making me laugh. Diego Vargas says, is Trump a symptom of all the untreated problems this country has had since the 1980s? I think it's accurate to say that he is a symptom. I think that it is inaccurate to say that he is the cause, but I also think it is probably more accurate to say that he is the logical next step in the evolution of right-wing politics, since the Nixon administration started appealing to religious extremists and racists, to Reagan shoveling money from the poor to the rich, and allowing, biased media organizations like Fox News to exist, funding right-wing propaganda channels. Like, we have eventually ended up cutting funding for public education. We've eventually ended up to where we are now. Steel Trap says, do you cry into your pillow at night because Trump is your president? No, but your mom has been crying into her pillow because I told her I'm not having sex with her anymore. Right. Congratulations, Steel Trap. I have fucked your mom enough where I am now blocking you. Okay. Fletch Lives Again says, thoughts on why the 35% of people don't vote? It's a good question. I think it's of multiple factors. I think voter suppression in Republican states is part of the reason. They just make it too hard for people to vote, and so people don't vote. I think the Electoral College and the Senate map are also intimately related to that. If you don't feel like it matters if you vote because you are a Republican in a blue state or a Democrat it doesn't really matter. Like, if you're in a blue state or a red state, you might feel like your vote doesn't matter because you feel like, oh, the people that I want to win are going to win, so why would I need to vote? Or the people that I don't like are definitely going to win, so why would I waste my time voting if I'm just going to be screaming at a brick wall? I think that is partially responsible as well. I think there's also a lot of very well-funded propaganda out there convincing people that to not vote by saying things like both parties are the same, or nothing ever changes, or, just like, emphasizing the fact that things like the Senate map and the Electoral College sometimes nullify their vote. Let's see here. I like to roar like Katy Perry says, they give all to rich, now people waiting for checks. That's not a question. Diego Vargas says, income inequality exploded in America after Reagan loosens regulations and introduced trickle-down economics. That is accurate. Mama Des says, please watch The Family on Netflix and see how Christian nationalists have changed politics. Ooh, that's interesting. Flamingo Mo says his mom is going to be sad. That is accurate. East Meets Westy Bessie says, you must be exhausted. Actually, fucking haters as bombs rejuvenates me. That is my recharging that happens. Okay. All right. Scrolling up. East Meets Westy Bessie says the mom job seems the best answer. You must be sore. Let's see here. Okay. Scrolling down the bottom. Diego Vargas says, will we ever have a president like FDR in our lifetime? I mean, Joe Biden. Joe Biden, the most progressive presidential administration that we've had since FDR. Was also hiding an illness from the American people. Let's see here. I like to roar like Katy Perry says, what you think? What I think about what? Person? Okay. D Main says, will something happen to Bondi after how bad she was today? This is insane. So she was bad according to everybody except Donald Trump. That is exactly what Donald Trump wants. He wants his people to go in front of the Senate and the House and lie and, call Democrats names and obfuscate and, yeah, just do anything but tell the truth or appear weak at all. So long as you are fighting and yelling and screaming and calling Democrats names, according to Donald Trump, you are doing your job. So yeah, I do not imagine that there were going to be any ramifications for anybody in the Trump administration up to unless Democrats do really good in the midterms and or there's a Democrat president in 28. Okay, Heath says, Unk, you pushed the vaccine. IQ test. I pushed something else into your mom. Diego Vargas says he was progressive, but his policies didn't get to take effect because they lost the House. I mean, some of his policies did. And there are some people who would argue that Biden himself actually didn't do any progressive policies, that he was basically too enfeebled to actually do any work, and it was his administration that was doing all the progressive policies. Either way, the Biden administration was nailing it. Okay. Kami Smasher V5 says, how surprising. What's how surprising? Okay, let's see here. All right, yeah, we got really low numbers today for some reason. That's bananas. But what are you gonna do? That's the way the TikTok dice rolls. Kimberlita says, do you think cabinet will be indicted for anything down the road? If we give Democrats more power, then yes. But if we don't, if we only give them a little bit, if we barely give them majorities in the House and Senate, if we don't give them the presidency, the reason why Democrats have this sort of like image of being feckless and ineffective is because the American people so rarely give them enough political power to actually do anything substantive. And so, can we give them a filibuster-proof majority? Can we give them the House? Can we give them potentially enough senators to remove Trump from office or expand the Supreme Court? There are a lot of options on the table if we just unelect every Republican and put Democrats in there instead. Mama Deb says we have a bunch of former beauty queens, and I don't know what that means. All right, everybody. David Douglas says the government shutdown is the reason why people aren't on here talking about politics. Maybe, potentially. I try not to let it hurt my feelings, even though, I am. I have it in here, but I don't have it in here yet. That my worth is not based on the number of views that I get on my videos or live streams. But, eventually this message works its way down to here. So, you just kind of have to work at it. It's a practice. Diego Vargas says, do you think that Obama letting the Bush administration with war crimes pave the way for the Trump administration today? Yeah, Obama was hindered by being the first black president. And he was also hindered by a white nationalist movement within the Republican Party that went completely fucking insane when he got elected and just decided to upend all of politics just to try to delay and stall and obstruct his, his agenda. So yeah, I don't see a world in which Obama could have been as progressive or punitive against war crimes done by the Bush administration as he wanted to, because it would be a bad look. And the media had not grown to the point where they could not be accidentally racist to Obama. There was a story that I heard recently about a Republican senator who called Barack Obama boy to his face. And to do that to the president is fucking bananas. And one of the people that was working in his cabinet was relaying the story and was like, that was not a fight that we could afford to have at that time, just calling this dude out on his racism. Like we were trying to get the Affordable Care Act passed or something like that, Okay, Digital Foods says, Commie Smasher, how about Mommy Smasher? You took the words right out of my mouth, Digital Foods. Let's see here. Shelly says, that's disgraceful. I completely agree. CTM says, he's fucking amazing. Who's fucking amazing? Uncle Hippie says, so the whole Trump cult was a racist backlash against Obama? I mean, I think that's probably one piece of the puzzle. But there's also, again, radicalization of the Republican Party that started from Nixon has just been accelerating. Income inequality, giving billionaires more control over the electoral progress, Citizens United, the rise of right-wing media. There's a bunch of things that were part of it. Kung Dan says, is socialism better than capitalism? I am sure that there is an argument to be made for the value of capitalism. I'm not really prepared to make it. Right now, I feel like we are all suffering from a hyper capitalism, a hyper crony capitalism that is only showing us the worst parts of the system. I believe in a mixed model. I believe that socialism and communism, capitalism can all work together. And in fact, it currently is in many countries, including America. But I think in America, we have too much capitalism. And so we probably need a little bit more socialism and communism to help balance things out. Andrew says, what is your political view? People like you and me, we don't have enough. The rich, they have too much. We should fix that. Diego Vargas says, were news outlets this partisan back in the 90s? It was different in the 90s. I remember. I grew up back then. Oof. Oh, excuse me. Yeah, in the 90s, we were living through, especially on the coasts, we were living through a period of unprecedented cultural progressivism because we thought we had solved things like misogyny and racism because, people were saying women can do every job and we shouldn't be discriminated against black people, et cetera, et cetera. There was a lot of unconscious racism and misogyny that still existed, and we had not really come to grips with that. So, you had a news media back then that was still learning the lesson of when you have a white criminal, don't just find the nicest picture of them. And when you have a black criminal, don't just find the worst picture that you have of them. Yeah. We hadn't learned a lot of lessons. And then on top of that, you have the emergence of, right-wing talk radio and Fox News, which is, obviously begins the kind of like hyper-partisanship of the news media. So yeah, the news media was kind of like radically centrist back then with some like undercurrents of unconscious misogyny and racism. And then all of a sudden you have right-wing media come out, which basically says the news is Democrats, and Democrats are psychopath, gay, gang lovers, shit like that. Okay, CTMT says the left is the worst of every ism and phobic out there. That is not true, CTMT. And I'm going to be real, CTM, I don't think that you are here in good faith because you have said two things. And one of them, the last thing you just said, was completely fucking bananas. All right, so we're just going to go ahead and block you before you can do anything else. Like say, Darth Psyduck says, AM radio is partisanship elsewhere, mostly not this bad. Yeah, I suppose. I didn't listen to a lot of AM radio back then. Let's see here. Andrew says, I've always been in the middle, but now it feels like I have to pick a side. What's your thoughts? So, Andrew, I don't think that you need to pick a side just for the sake of picking a side. I think that you should pick a side because one side is massively better than the other, and the other side is massively worse than the other. I would love to talk to you about things that are more specific than that, but I have a lot of data and expertise to back up this claim. And so if there's an issue that you feel particularly strongly about, I would love to be part of the work of getting you out of the middle and onto the side of goodness and righteousness and justness. So yeah, let's engage, man. You can either put some shit in the comments or you can send me a DM. I'm happy to engage in any way. David Douglas says, Barry Weiss running CBS News. Yeah, that was a giveaway to the Trump administration. I just listened to some reporter was interviewed today about all of that, and he was basically saying, like, Barry Weiss is, she was just put in charge of the Titanic after it had hit the iceberg. So, yeah, this is all just Paramount trying to kiss Trump's ass so that he will approve the merger that they have. What do you call it? That they have on the books, Danny is terrible says, thoughts on the U.S. escalation. Do you mean like of political violence or of escalating tensions with other countries? Can you be more specific, Danny? Kimberlina says, right has gone so far that I am somewhat middle and now feel far left. I think that is the right response, Kimberlina. Is there anything that you that makes you feel like you don't want to associate with the left? Oreo20 says, do you think Trump will use the Insurrection Act? If so, what can people do? So what people can do, Oreo, is the exact same thing that people can always do, the work. Voting, protesting, boycotting, striking, talking to your friends and neighbors, forming, political action groups and mutual aid societies and shit like that. What can he do if they do the Insurrection Act? Our rights don't go away if that happens, but he has a little bit more leeway to, like, the military cannot be law enforcement in American states, in America. After he invokes the Insurrection Act, he could potentially get the military to start doing more law enforcement associated things. And as I'm speaking this out loud, I may be confusing the Insurrection Act with martial law, so let's just go ahead and take everything I just said with a massive grain of salt, and instead I will say I will Google that later to make sure that I am not speaking out of my ass. Okay. Andrew says, I was left, then went to the middle after it felt like Kamala was a forced presidential candidate. Okay, that's interesting, Andrew. Can I ask you this, Andrew? So you saw what happened, obviously. You saw that Biden decided to run for a second term, and then it came out that he was way too old and enfeebled to run for a second term, and so they had 100 days left before the election. What do you think the Democratic Party should have done instead? Instead of, just basically blessing Kamala Harris with the nomination because nobody really ran against her, and there was only 100 days left until the election. Let's see here. But again, Uncle Hippie, Dan Blackbird were not. Dan Blackbird said he's lying. So why would that push you to the middle? So you banned your ideology because somebody made a mistake. All right, guys, let's be cool to Andrew. He hasn't said anything so far that makes me think that he's full of it. Let's be cool. Danny's Terrible says, thoughts on the U.S. escalation with Venezuela. Sorry, I accidentally sent it, LMAO. I am concerned because it seems like Trump wants to go to war with Venezuela. I don't know why specifically he wants to do that. I believe it's probably part of the authoritarian playbook. You do this so that you have an excuse to further militarize and potentially steal resources, expand the empire. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if he thinks that he's going to get more powers as a wartime president. Potentially, he could use that as an excuse to cancel elections because we're at war. We're at war. We can't have elections. He has said so many times, to other authoritarians or people like Zelensky who have had to cancel elections because they're in the middle of the war. He's like, oh, I like that. I like that move a lot. That's really cool. I could do something like that too, probably. Andrew says, sorry if I'm offending anyone. Just genuinely curious during these confusing times. Yes, Andrew, I'm going to apologize on behalf of my chat stream. Sometimes they can get a little quick. They can get an itchy trigger finger, But you are welcome here. Nobody's coming for you. Nobody's trying to roast you or own you. But yeah, Andrew, tell me what you think the Democratic Party should have done with 110 days left until the election. Did you think that there was a better solution than just ushering in Kamala Harris as the nominee? Let me know, Andrew. John Reynolds says, why did the Supreme Court not hear the Brunson case, all about the 10 days rule about election fraud? I don't know anything about the Brunson case, John. I'm not really sure. Lovely X Fan says, do you think USA is going to go to war? They might not even call it war. I'm on the fence between Trump loves telling people that he's this peacetime leader and he ends conflicts and no new wars start under his administration, but he also loves doing military shit. He loved bombing Iran. He loved assassinating Qasem Soleimani. He loves sending the military to shoot boats off the coast of Venezuela. So yeah, I honestly don't know. Andrew says, I'm not sure, honestly. Everything just felt weird seeing it real time. No time for a primary, question mark. So some people might argue, Andrew, that they could have done a floor primary at the DNC. There 100% was not time to do a new 50-state primary, but potentially delegates could have voted during the Democratic National Convention on who they wanted the nominee to be. The problem with that, though, Andrew, was that there were two states. It was Ohio, and I forget what the second one was, that had Republican state governments. Like their state legislatures were all run by Republicans. And they told the Democratic Party that if you don't tell us the name of your nominee before the convention, then we are going to print our ballots without the name of the candidate on them. And that would have been a massive disadvantage to whoever the candidate was, especially in places like Ohio, which was a swing state. So it is my opinion that the Democrats were dealt a nasty hand by an egotistical Joe Biden who thought that he could run for a second term despite being way too old to. He fucked them, and then the Republican Party took advantage of that and forced their hand and basically said, "You have to tell us the nominee." And Kamala Harris was the best option that they had at the time. She was the vice president, so it made more sense for her to be the nominee than anybody else. Honestly, if they had picked anybody else, that would have felt like the Democratic Party was installing a candidate. But putting Kamala Harris on the ticket was literally just moving her over from vice president to regular presidential candidate. Let's see here, but it's interesting, Andrew. I can understand living through it and feeling like that. Is there anything else? Is there any other reason why you feel like you would not just say that you are a person on the left, or not just say that you are a person on the right? Andrew says, thanks. Why do you think Biden waited so long to drop out? I think ego. I think that he is a very prideful person. I read the book. So Jake Tapper, the reporter, wrote a whole book about this, where he talked very specifically about who was working intimately with Joe Biden, what about Joe Biden's history made him feel like he could have won again. And it's interesting because there's all these narratives around, who knew what, and the Democratic Party knew that Joe Biden was a dementia patient, and so they were parading this corpse in front of everybody and gaslighting us into thinking that he was lapping them all in meetings behind the scenes and stuff like that. But what's clear when you read this book is that there were like a handful of people who were doing this. There were a handful of people in his inner circle, his wife, Hunter Biden, for example, who were purposefully hiding this information from the rest of the country and from the Democratic Party at large. And, they could sometimes hide his condition by saying things like, oh, he just got off of a long flight. Sometimes people would trick themselves by thinking like, oh, this is probably just a bad day that he had. But yeah, he is somebody who has outperformed his critics so many times in the past that, I'm sure he just felt like, I've done it before and I can do it again, something like that. All right. Dan Blackwood says nominating someone other than Kamala Harris would have been the Oscar goes to Crash moment. Agree. Let's see here. Sharkspear says, hi, Jarrett. Hi, Beck. Let's see here. Terry B says Jill wanted him to. Yeah, probably accurate. Bite Size Techum says, do you agree that we are in a Schumer shutdown? No, we are not. The Republican Party is trying to make all of our health insurance costs go up, and the Democratic Party is trying to stop that from happening. I also think that there is a larger issue behind not funding an authoritarian government, and I would be fine if the Democrats were saying that too. I would be fine if they were saying, we are not going to fund the government because Donald Trump is ignoring the law, ignoring judges. He is sending the military into American cities, despite the objections of the local government and the citizens of those cities and states. He is demonizing half of the country, calling them the enemy within. We're cutting the budget of the government for resources that every American needs. And instead, we are taking that money, we're putting it into the pockets of billionaires, and we are building data centers for AI, and we are building concentration camps for people who have done absolutely nothing fucking wrong. ICE is a rogue agency, and so we're not going to fund it anymore. I would have been fine with that too, but the healthcare fight is good on its own as well. Andrew says, I'm in the middle because after the last year and the last month, I feel disconnected from the left. Okay, I guess that's kind of interesting. Do you know what the platform of the left is? Do you feel like you aren't being given the Democrats' messaging? Are you watching their messaging and not enjoying it? For me, I don't really give a shit what their messaging strategy is. Like, I know what their platform is, And so that's the thing I'm voting for. And if they don't describe that platform to me perfectly, I'm not mad. I understand why somebody might, feel, disengaged from a party that isn't speaking their language. But to me, I don't really care if you're speaking my language. If you tell me you're going to solve income inequality and you're going to have green energy instead of fucking disgusting fossil fuels that are causing climate change and giving everybody lung cancer, like, you got my vote. But what do you think about that, Andrew? Let me know. Thor says, is Trump going to be first American king? No, he will not. We will not let him be that, Thor. Andrew says, some of my friends on the left praise the assassination of Kirk. I didn't agree with him, but still. I mean, I don't think anybody should be celebrating extrajudicial murders, whether it is, drug smugglers from Venezuela getting murdered by the Trump administration, or, an extremely disturbed individual assassinating a right-wing commentator like Charlie Kirk. And I can understand, like, you see people on the left celebrating a murder and an assassination, and maybe it makes you want to not support that political party. But I would encourage you to think about it like this instead, that the base of both parties, both right and left, have some really shitty people in them who do things like celebrate rampant political violence. I'm sure that there are people on the right who celebrated those two Democratic state senators that got assassinated, and the judge she just had her house burned down with her family inside because she ruled against Trump. But I think it's more important to look at what the mouthpieces are doing. What are the people with the platforms doing? What are the thought leaders and the politicians and the people with like millions and millions of followers on both sides? And where that's concerned, the difference between the two parties is stark. It is the people on the left being very responsible and condemning political violence of every kind, and people on the right are escalating tensions and encouraging their base to be violent. There was an op-ed in the Daily Wire, which is a right-wing publication, that was basically titled, like, I am calling for political violence against the left. And he reiterated it like 3 times in the column. Alex Jones said, we're preparing for civil war. Elon Musk said the left is the party of murder. Like, all of that stuff is really escalatory. So I don't really care what a bunch of individuals that I might know or on the internet are doing and saying, that I think is in really bad taste. Where I think it's really irresponsible for people who have a really big mouthpiece, a really big platform like the president, like Alex Jones, like JD Vance and Elon Musk, to be saying things that are so divisive and encouraging of violence. Like, what do you think about that, Andrew? Mimi McMeme says, why do we still give so much aid to Israel when Americans are struggling to make ends meet? So there's 2 answers to that question. Number one, why are we doing it right now? Is because Republicans are in charge, and Republicans are fully aligned with what the Netanyahu government is currently doing to the surrounding nations. Because the Republican Party is either, the politicians are either religious extremists who believe that Israel needs to take over that region so that we can usher in the rapture, or they are white nationalists who believe that Israel is better than the surrounding nations because they are more white presenting, or they are just really cool with, ethnically cleansing beachfront property so that they can build condos and shit on there, and having a foothold in the Middle East so they can get more access to fossil fuels, stuff like that. The reason why the American government at large, even under Democratic presidents, was continuing to fund Israel is a little bit more complicated than that. AIPAC is an extremely well-funded lobbying organization that exerts a lot of pressure on politicians. The road is littered with the bodies of politicians that have tried to stand up to AIPAC. And so, even if you are somebody who wants to stop giving money to Israel, you've been incentivized to not vote that way, or AIPAC will come after you and lose you your election, stuff like that. Okay. It's the Rocketeer says, I'm mad because Biden explicitly said he'd be a 1-term transitional president and he'd step out of the way for 2024. Yeah, I'm mad too, 100%. It's the Rocketeer. Meme McMeme says, even when Biden, Obama, and Clinton were in office, Israel still got billions. Yeah, I explained that, Meme McMeme. But here's the thing. The Democratic Party has always been and currently is better than the Republican Party on this issue, where a Democratic politician might take AIPAC money or might vote to keep sending money to Israel because they are being threatened by AIPAC. The Republican Party is doing it because they want to be doing it. And I think that that is a big difference. If we can show the Democratic Party that they do not need to fear AIPAC because we are going to work to get them elected, I guarantee you they will stop taking that money and they will start voting against sending them money and weapons. There are already a record number of Democrats that are voting against sending more money and weapons to Israel. And I will go fucking politician for politician for you if you like, because I think maybe it's like 1% of the Republican Party is voting against it, and over 50% of the Democratic Party is voting for it. Okay, Mike's D says, people like you who think their party is perfect are the problem. I do not think my party is perfect. Mike D. 312MQ says, did you hear about ICE shooting someone and claiming they had a gun and it wasn't true? I did hear about the ramming thing. I don't know if this is the same story, but yeah, ICE is lying. ICE is violating people's civil liberties. They are denying people due process. They are doing barbaric and inhumane shit because they are operating without any accountability or oversight. That alone should make everybody not vote for Republicans. That alone should be every Republican losing their job in 26 and in 28. Because even if they weren't the ones that ordered ICE to go do that, they are currently letting it happen. They are in charge of Congress. They have control of the judiciary, and they are letting ICE do barbaric, unconstitutional, illegal, expensive shit. Where you and me, we would love to be able to go to the fucking doctor or be able to afford a nice meal sometimes. Instead, we are giving that money to ICE to do fucking atrocities. So yeah, fucking unelect every Republican. They are letting this happen. Alrighty, let's see here. Walrustius says, right, it's insane people should support ICE right now. Agree. 312MQ says, is there any accountability we can put on ICE? I'm starting to think that even CPD is starting to hate ICE. Yeah, you know, they have been given orders not to assist them. The things that we can do, 312MQ, ooh, that I like the sound of that. Things we can do, 312MQ. It's the things that we always do. You know, it is voting and protesting and boycotting and striking, talking to your friends and family and neighbors and coworkers, putting political pressure on your elected representatives. It's what I call the work. And the way that we fight ICE, the way that we fight Trump's corruption, the way that we fight the tech billionaires, the way that we fight monopolization and, you know, voter suppression and insert shitty thing that Republicans are doing here is we do the work. The work, and the work is working. You know, Kimmel is back on television. The work is working. The problem is that we need more people to be doing the work. We just need more people. And when we get more people, we will win. But we just need to get those people. And I think that everybody watching this should be a deputized recruiter for getting more people to do the work. And that's how we fight back. That's how we win. Andrew says 2024 was first time voting, was going to vote Biden, then RFK after Biden dropped out, and I didn't vote. You know, Andrew, I would encourage you to vote in every single election. You know, excuse me, got something in my throat there. You know, and I'm worried about where you're getting your news from. If you thought that RFK would have been a good candidate. But I think everybody should vote, Andrew. Our voter participation in this country is pathetic. And so if more people vote, I think we'll have a better country. Let's see here. Nick Cardoso says, don't you dislike politics? I mean, I don't like the Republican Party. I don't like, gamifying politics, but I think that being informed and engaged in politics is essential for every American citizen. Nick Cardoso says, would you say you're a fan of politics? I personally am tired of both sides. Hey, what cool emojis that I'm getting. Thank you, East Meets Westy Bestie. I appreciate those. You know, Nick Cardoso, I object to the both sides narrative. I object to the idea that you can be equally tired of both sides, or both sides are equally bad, or both parties are the same, or whatever. Because if you take sort of like the bird's eye view, if you take the net of American politics, it becomes clear that the Democratic Party is like a lot better than the Republican Party, and the Republican Party is a lot worse than the Democratic Party. The politicians are better, the platform is better, outcomes are better on both the federal and state level. So I guess I would just encourage you to be more specific about your criticisms of politics, and to recognize that there's one party that is working for you and one party that is working to hurt you. Okay, Ali N, good to see you again. Andrew says, I usually watch CNN, but now I stay away from it. Oh, yeah, do you think you get, how much of your news do you think you get, like, through osmosis just based on what you see on social media, Andrew? Right. Good Guy 53 says, there's no Democrat. You're either a communist Democrat or a socialist Democrat. That is inaccurate, Good Guy. There are plenty of centrist Democrats still. Andrew says, I wish we had a bigger election with more than just two main parties. Could that ever happen? So the issue with that, Andrew, is that there's a thing called a spoiler candidate. So let's say that you got three candidates running for president. One of them is Donald Trump, one of them is Joe Biden, and one of them is Bernie Sanders. And the issue with that is that because Bernie and Joe are sort of like representing the left of the country, and that's two people, and Donald Trump is representing the right of this country, and that's only one person, then Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders could potentially get more votes than Donald Trump. But because they're splitting the vote between the two of them, then Donald Trump just wins that election. The way that we solve that is with a thing called ranked choice voting, where you can vote for as many candidates as you like, and you kind of rank them in order that you like them best. So I would vote Bernie Sanders number one, Joe Biden number two, and then I would not vote for Donald Trump at all because I think that he's a terrible president and person. The problem with ranked choice voting is that in order to get it, we would need to vote in the Democratic Party because the Republican Party is actively hostile to ranked choice voting because that threatens their ability to gain power. They have a bill in the House that they're sponsoring. I can give you the name of it if you want to Google it, to make ranked choice voting illegal in America. And so if you want more parties, then you need to vote for a Democratic Party because they are the ones who are willing and open to incorporating smaller parties into American politics. Eric says, how are any candidates preparing us for a changing economic landscape? I mean, I don't really know what anybody can be doing. I know that, governors and mayors could potentially be trying to, shield their state governments and city halls from, avalanching economic catastrophes, but there's only so much that they can do. Like, it really is up to the Republican Party to do anything about our rapidly approaching economic collapse. Andrew says, thank you, Jared, for all the input. I have to go, but I would love to join the live tomorrow. Yeah, you're always welcome here, my guy. My regular streaming schedule is Monday through Friday, starting around 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. Alien says, do you think Gavin is a progressive enough candidate for president? He is. I don't think he is progressive enough for me, but he is definitely progressive enough to be a candidate. He's also centrist enough to be a candidate. He is, I don't know if this is how he is in real life, but the image that he is putting forward is of a human being who was designed in a lab to be the Democratic nominee for president, where he has a record of some centrist shit, he has a record of some progressive shit, he is tall, he is straight, he is white, he is a man, he is handsome. It's just like, it's a fucking slam dunk. Where the primary is concerned, I like to dig into who the person is and what their policies are and what they plan on doing. But where the general is concerned, if it's Gavin Newsom, I'm fucking on the Gavin train, man. Eric says, what do you think of Andrew Yang's policies when he ran for president? I mean, I love UBI as a policy. I think the issue with Andrew Yang was that he was doing what billionaires always do, which is they start these ego-driven, runs for president instead of, trying to, I don't know, get a little experience in government first, show that you can actually do some of this work before we just escalate you to the most powerful human being on planet Earth, So yeah, that always turned me off of Andrew Yang. The fact that he tried to start his own party that was basically just the same policies as the Democratic Party, but just different branding. It's like, maybe that's solving the problem, but I don't think it is, But yeah, UBI, fucking, value tax on the wealthy. Like, absolutely, man. Give me that. I'll take that every day of the week and twice on Sunday. Let's see here. Josh G. Fishman says, "How about that Japanese and Philippines trade deal?" Well, that's an excellent question, Josh G. I would love to see something on paper, but right now it's only Donald Trump talking about it. And according to the Japanese, he is making up some shit. Eric says, "I'd rather discuss the actual policies, not the individual." Yeah, I completely agree with that, but I also think that character can matter. If we have two politicians who have the exact same platform and one of them seems to be like a shittier person, then, I'll probably vote for the other one instead. Okay. Hippie Dan says, "I suspect UBI will become necessary within 5 years due to AI and robotics." I completely agree with that. And I would even say it's probably going to be necessary even sooner than that. We are staring down the barrel of a massive unemployment crisis and inflation. It's stagflation. It's the worst of both worlds. So yeah, it's possible that we're going to need that sooner rather than later. They already have that for fucking farmers. They're getting fucked over by Trump's trade policies, where all these soybean farmers now have nobody to sell their fucking soybeans to, because we bailed out Argentina's libertarian government, and now they have the only soybean contract in town with China. Now, all these farmers that used to sell their soybeans to China are now fucked, and they're just going to they've got their hands out for a government bailout now. Yeah, that's basically just UBI for farmers, Lemmy Gardenmeister says, "Do you think millions of people who voted for Biden didn't vote for Kamala because she was a woman?" I don't know about millions. I think that there are some people who have unrecognized, unconscious sexism and racism. And so where a person might think to themselves, "I am not a racist, I am not a sexist, but I just can't see myself voting for Kamala Harris. I don't know what it is about her. I just don't like, she doesn't look like a president to me," like kind of that stuff. But I wouldn't say it's in the millions. Maybe it's a million people felt like that. And we're talking about people that voted for Biden specifically. Like, I'm sure that there are millions of people on the right who, were openly like, "I am not voting for a woman or a person of color." Alrighty. Not showing my pretty face says, "Considering what we give for disability, UBI would be like 1K a month. Odds that it would be livable." I mean, obviously 1K a month is not great, especially in the current cost of living crisis. But I do not believe that there is anything innate in our economy or in our government whereby UBI would only be that no matter what. Like, depending on what politicians we elect, it could be more. Yeah, I think that I view the economy sort of like this. We've got this really complicated machine that just needs to be tweaked here and there, and then things will hopefully start to balance out, and we won't have so much income inequality, and people will be able to afford to live really nice lives and stuff like that. Alrighty. And yeah, David Douglas makes a really good point that 1K for an 18-year-old person would make a huge difference to the working class. Yeah, we're not even talking about just living off of that 1K. That's, I think, is the most important point that I completely forgot to mention, is that a lot of this will be supplemental to whatever job you can also do. If you're working part-time, but you just also have an extra $1,000 coming into your paycheck every month, like, that can be transformative for people. And I'm sure that there are people right now who are desperate, who don't have a job, who would be desperate for 1K a month. Like, anything helps. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I am completely out of steam, but this was a good one. I'm really glad that we met Andrew. That was a fun one. Yeah. We got some fun stuff over on Twitch and YouTube. Y'all are having fun. Not asking any serious questions, but I'm glad that you're there being silly billies. So yeah, if you got any questions that I was not able to answer here on the live stream, DMs are open. You can email me through my website. Link is in the bio. You can join the Discord. Link is in the bio. I love the Discord as a resource for you guys being able to get in touch, or, be a community amongst each other. And there's great recommendations on there for podcasts and books, and great civic action that you can take. All the work is listed out on there. If you want to support the show financially, you can, but you don't have to. I have a Patreon that you can join for as little as $1 a month. link is in the bio. I have a store you can buy things from. Link is in the bio. And also you can send gifts and become a super subscriber and shit on TikTok and Twitch and YouTube and all the various ways. Let's see here. My friend It's the Rocketeer, says that if you got a free Prime sub to give to me on Twitch, that would give me a little bit of money, which would be really nice, of course. Let's see here. Anything else I want to tell you guys? Regular streaming schedule is Monday through Friday, starting around 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. And just a really sincere thank you to everybody for being here and for asking questions. And just please do the work, everybody. We need more people to do the work, and we need people to recruit people to do the work. And so I hope that you all out there are not just enjoying me for entertainment value, but are actually taking this information out into the world and being part of the solution, et cetera, et cetera. I would much rather have everybody on board doing the work and not have a show where I get to talk about politics for an hour every weekday. But my impetus in doing this show is in realizing that future. So hopefully you guys will all help me, realize that future. Alrighty, everybody. Have an excellent Tuesday. Be good to yourselves. Be good to each other. And I will see y'all tomorrow. Same bat time, same bat channel. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.